Science in Pajamas. Woo! Alright, you guys. So, today we're going to talk about density independent factors. So, these are a type of limiting factors. In our last video, we talked about density dependent, which meant that the size of the population would be affected. A population would be affected by a certain condition if it was a larger size population. For instance, competition. The more organisms there are, in other words, the larger the population, then the more competition there would be for food. But the smaller the population, then the less competition there would be. Well, today we're going to talk about type of limiting factors that will affect all populations in an area regardless of their size. And those are called density independent factors. So as we already said, they're ones that will affect everything in their area, everything in the environment, not just the big populations, but every single population. Now there are 4 categories of density independent factors: unusual weather, natural disasters, seasonal cycles, and certain human activities. We're going to talk about each one. I'll give you some examples of these. We'll mention how it is that they are density independent factors and what that means for each one of these. All right? Great. So let's talk about unusual weather. There might be conditions where, weather that's stronger than normal comes through, such as a hurricane. Now, there are some areas that are more prone to hurricanes, but if a hurricane has a lot of strength, it can actually go beyond that. For instance, it's not that common for hurricanes to come all the way up the East Coast and affect everything up there with really bad hurricane strength winds and all that. But a couple years ago, there's one so bad that came up the East Coast that affected all the way over to Morgantown, West Virginia, which is where I lived at the time. And it created storms all because we were in the very edge of the storm of the hurricane. But it created storms and actually resulted in snow before Halloween. And that was unusual. That was very, very unusual. So that's why we say these are unusual weathers. So we have flooding, bad storms, we have high winds. And when this occurs, it will affect every population in that area. So in this area, if there is this stronger than normal hurricane and it starts to flood, it's not like the flooding is only going to affect a deer population if it's a large population. No, it's going to affect every population. The high winds aren't only going to blow the nests of birds with large populations out of the tree. It's going to blow all the nests out of the tree, even if it's an endangered species. The weather doesn't care. Natural disasters, such as a volcano. Now what that leads to is ash, lava, burning. As the volcano erupts, it creates a bunch of ash in the air. Now that's going to affect a lot of different populations. It will temporarily block out the sun, which could affect photosynthesis of plants. It will also make it harder for organisms that need to breathe, like us, or deer, or wolves, or birds. So that will affect all of those populations. And the lava, as it comes rolling down the mountain, or rolling down the side of the volcano, it doesn't just, that's a larger population of rabbits over there, I'm just going to flow in that direction. No, it's going to flow wherever gravity and the path of least resistance is. So whether it is flowing down and burning a large population of rabbits or a small population of otters, it doesn't really care. It's just going to keep flowing. And even the fish aren't immune to this. If there's a lake or anything, A lot of times sulfur and other chemicals will come up through the ground and could actually turn a lake into an acid lake, which will then kill all the fish in that lake. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a large population or a small population, doesn't matter if they're endangered or common, it will affect everything there. And then, of course, the burning. It's going to burn the trees, burn the animals. It's just going to create a path of destruction. Seasonal cycles. So whether we're talking about winter versus summer, or a rainy season versus a dry season, or a wildfire season, these are conditions that occur every year and actually allow for adaptation. Now, typically with these first three, organisms either have to escape the situation, they die in the situation, or they can adapt to the situation. Now, with seasonal cycles, that's where we tend to see a lot more of the adaptations. For instance, we mentioned wildfires. There are some areas where during the dry season it is very common to have wildfires, and many of the organisms have even adapted to that seasonal cycle of wildfires during the dry season. So the wildfire is exactly what it sounds like. There's burning. A lot of the plants and organic matter has dried out, which is what makes it very brittle, and thus allows for, a small spark to turn into a raging inferno. But what they found is that in areas where wildfires are common, that plants have specifically adapted to it. So certain shrubs, bushes, grasses, etc., yes, they're going to get completely burned up. But their seeds need the heat from the fire in order to germinate. So the seeds cannot grow until the fire activates them. And many of the trees, same thing with their seeds, they need the intense heat of the fire in order to germinate, but also they tend to have thicker bark and more moisture retained in the middle. Now, the thicker bark is what will protect it from the majority of the flames, but even if the flames do get through the bark, the moisture on the inside of the tree is going to prevent that part from burning. So they've actually adapted to these conditions. But these seasonal cycles, again, because they affect the entire ecosystem, the entire environment, it does still affect every population regardless of size. It doesn't matter if it is a large population of trees or a small population of trees. A wildfire is going to affect whatever trees are there. And the last density independent factor is certain human activities. So these can include such things as mining, building a dam, or deforestation, and whether that is for farmland or to build structures like buildings, cities, homes, etc. Now, mining isn't just wandering into a cave, finding stuff, and bringing it out. When mining occurs, there's a lot of machinery, there's a lot of digging, explosives, etc. So even if you are going into a cave and digging out in there, there's still an ecosystem in that cave. And the presence of humans and all of these machineries and equipments, as well as a process of blowing up sections and digging into others, is going to affect the entire ecosystem, again, regardless of population size. There's also another type of mining called mountaintop removal. What they do is they'll go in and they'll place explosives at certain points all around the top of the mountain. Then they will set off said explosives, creating a big old explosion. And that's why they call it mountaintop removal, because they essentially explode the entire top of the mountain, thus destroying it. As a result, now they can go in and just kind of dig through the rubble to find whatever it is they are mining for, whether it's coal or whatever. Now, since they are destroying the top of the mountain, they are destroying the ecosystem, which means that, well, destroying all the populations that are present there. So you can definitely see how that will have some negative effects. Or we build a dam. Now, a lot of times what they'll do to build a dam is there'll be a river, and then they will block it off. They'll create a larger reservoir of water on one side and no water on the other. So what you're doing is taking this small river population on one side and converting it into a lake. So you are changing the ecosystem because a lot of the dry land is going to become an aquatic ecosystem now. So that's going to affect all of the organisms that once used that area for a dry land ecosystem. On this side, the water is no longer flowing through, so that means all of the aquatic organisms on this side are going to die because they no longer have an aquatic ecosystem. You dried it out, and now it's going to become a land ecosystem. For deforestation, that is us actually completely removing the forest ecosystem. And whether we're doing it and converting it into farmland for grazing, or we are removing it so that we can build a city or a town or a parking lot or a mall or some kind of building or home or apartments, we are actually removing the ecosystem completely, which means every single population in that ecosystem is going to be displaced or killed. So since we are affecting, again, the entire ecosystem, it will affect every single population there. It doesn't matter what the size of the population is. When you affect the entire ecosystem, you affect all populations, big or small. All right, so I hope that helped you to understand what density independent factors are and how they affect all ecosystems. Sorry, Ripley. In the meantime, you guys, stay awesome, take care of yourselves, and I will see you later. All right, guys. Bye-bye.